of the 4 we gave, I know you wanted Deshaun Watson involved in this as well. We can get to that a little later.
Yep.
But of the 4 we've included, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, and Tua, which of those 4 in your head is under the most pressure to win?
It's undoubtedly Aaron Rodgers for me.
Really?
You can make a case, I think, for 2 more. I think you can make a case for Lamar. You can make a case for Dak. I see why Tua is on the list, but I think the others are definitely under most pressure. Specifically with Rodgers, though, that whole situation has just stunk from the beginning.
Get hurt.
Joe Douglas going out, taking basically 3 months to trade for Aaron Rodgers. Is he coming? Is he not? Is he coming? Is he not? Getting his guys, they get Alan Lazard, they get a bunch of guys that Rodgers wants on the roster.
Aaron Rodgers general manager saga.
I understand it. Getting Nathaniel Hackett, who, it is with all due respect, Nathaniel Hackett probably not an NFL offensive coordinator
only
if he didn't know Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, only successful with him.
Quick Hackett story, by the way. Remember when he thought that McManus was going to hit a 62-yard field goal on Monday Night Football in Seattle? Anyway, keeping on going. The whole situation stinks, Colin. The Hassan Reddick situation. The GM, the head coach, Salah. Rodgers calling Robert Salah Robert instead of coach. It needs to work out for the Jets. And the Jets are an organization that is starving for quarterback play. I think more than any team in the NFL. I think the Jets, Colin, have been starving for quarterback play more than any team in the NFL. And Rodgers, this could kind of taint. I don't think he has to prove anything to anybody. Let me make that clear. Number one, I like Aaron Rodgers a lot. I think he's the best quarterback, if not arguably the best quarterback I've seen with my own 2 eyes. But this could possibly taint his image a little bit by going to New York, fizzling out, and never being good. I think it's Rodgers, no doubt.
It's a little bit of the Favre route if he does that. I don't think this is a Rodgers thing as much because Rodgers is, number one, has won to begin with. And it was a great Super Bowl he won over the Steelers, granted 15 years ago. But nonetheless, Rodgers has been there and he's won. And he's had success in Green Bay, and he never really got over the hump to get back to the Super Bowl. But there's a little bit of a legacy thing on the line with Rodgers. You know what I think is good about Rodgers? He's very motivated by what everybody else thinks of him. And whether other quarterbacks kind of shrivel to that fact, I think that's really what lights him up. And I think the fact that everybody is, the Jets are the Jets, and they're going to get in their own way. Rodgers got hurt last year. He had a bad game against Detroit to finish off his Packer career. He had a couple rough playoff games against San Francisco. I could see Rodgers really coming out and playing with a chip on his shoulder. And he doesn't necessarily need to, but for somebody that is always in the limelight and always in the headline, now it's about football. I could see him having a dangerous year. My pick for this on which quarterback is under the most pressure to win, I think this is without a doubt. I'm surprised it's not leading the vote at the moment. I think it's without a doubt Lamar Jackson. Lamar, this is somebody who has had an insurmountable amount of regular season success. We know this. They've been good with him. They've consistently been good with him. He's had 2 MVPs, but is somebody who has been terrible, with a capital T, terrible in the postseason. And there's no doubt in my mind that Raven fans are, all right, it's time to make this work. You can't just be fantastic in the regular season and then shrivel in the postseason every year, Lamar. There's a certain point where we're going to have to see some postseason production. A guy who's 2-4 in the playoffs, 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions over that career, 3 rushing touchdowns and 6 fumbles. Maybe it's time for the MVP to play like an MVP when the MVP is supposed to play like an MVP in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Lamar, without a doubt in my head, is the guy who needs to win the most.
Do you want to know what I think Lamar has working against him?
What's that?
Playing in the AFC and having the guy named Patrick Mahomes in his way.
But he ran into Mahomes that one time. Like, Lamar's also not been great against a number of teams. That Charger game when he was in 2019, there's a number of games that's not named Patrick Mahomes that has stumped him in his tracks. I understand last year was a problem, but it's not. It hasn't been just Mahomes. That's the Josh Allen route.
I think it talks to how competitive the AFC is rather than the NFC. I feel like the NFC has the Niners and the Lions. The AFC has the Chiefs. You have the Bills. You have the Bengals. I could argue you have the entire AFC North in general. I think the AFC North is the most competitive division in football.
Well, I agree. I agree with that.
And Colin, they play in that division. But he gets the hell beat out of him in that division with Pittsburgh and the Browns.
This is less about the competition. This is more about him performing. He hasn't played well.
A lot of people don't. Colin, it takes quarterbacks. I think the quarterback position in general, when it comes to the postseason, it takes some quarterbacks some time. We could say the same thing about Josh Allen. Allen's not on this list.
I agree. Allen should be more along the lines of what you just said. He's had the trouble of running into Mahomes. Allen's played great in the postseason.
Okay. I want you to ask me a question, partner. Ask me the 3 best quarterbacks in the league not named Patrick Mahomes.
All right, go for the 3 best quarterbacks in the league that exclude Patrick Mahomes.
Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Those are the best 3. And what do they have in common? The lack of playoff success. I understand Burrow got to one, okay? You could argue that, hey, Riz, Burrow got to one. He's the only one to beat the Chiefs. I understand that. But there's no hardware between those 3 guys. And the point I tried to make about Patrick Mahomes, Colin, I think correlates to that. Who is going to dethrone Mahomes? And Lamar Jackson.
What about his performance? I'm asking about, he hasn't done well. It's not. Burrow played great in the postseason.
Mahomes, I could sit here and argue in that game against Baltimore, Mahomes didn't play well. I could argue Mahomes didn't play well all last season.
But Mahomes has had 17 games in which he's been great.
For sure, but Colin, sometimes it just takes a little bit for quarterbacks to get it going in the playoffs. Everyone could have an off year. Now, it's unfortunate.
I mean, it's year 8. But
it's unfortunate. It's been on the consistent route for Jackson. But, brother, I'm not sitting here going, if he doesn't win a Super Bowl, he's done.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's under the most pressure, though. More so than, think about it. He hasn't played well. Is there a Lamar Jackson playoff game in anybody's head? They killed Houston, sure. But does that game pop into your head? Yeah, it pops into your head for Allen, pops into your head for Burrow. Does it pop into your head for Lamar? It even pops into your head for Hurts. Hurts played great in that Super Bowl.
To fuel your point, the lasting image I have of Lamar Jackson in the playoffs is that second half. Colin, the Chiefs didn't score a point in the second half. I get where the gripes are at. I think it's only a matter of time Lamar is going to figure this thing out. The Chiefs aren't going to win the Super Bowl every single year. They're not going to get to the Super Bowl every single year. I think this whole Chiefs thing ends this year. I do.
You don't think we're going to see
it's
them
a question. It's a question for another show.
You think it's going to be Lamar that's going to do this?
Out of all those 3, it could be any of the 3, the Allen, the Lamar, or the Burrow. I could see all 3 of them winning, Colin, at one point in their career. They're all young. I mean, how old is Lamar Jackson?
He's probably 27 at this point, 28.
It's still a long way. And I know the way he plays, maybe his longevity isn't as long as Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. But Colin, these guys are young.
But
I don't understand a Baltimore Raven fan that goes, we need to upgrade Lamar. We need.
There hasn't no Ravens fan says that. But what the Ravens fan is saying is that
last year they were when he needed a contract.
You want to get
remember when he needed a contract? These conversations came up when he needed a contract.
And then he had the MVP season. So I guess they said that
he won an MVP before the contract.
In 2019, I understand that. There's a point to that, but I thought everybody was in arms about let's pay Lamar. Sure, there might be the Joe down the road who might disagree.
I guess I think there are 2 more quarterbacks on this list, Colin, that are more under pressure.
Who's the second one?
Dak. He needs a contract. They haven't won a playoff game.
Contractually, that makes sense. Legacy-wise, do you think over Lamar?
I think so. He plays for the Cowboys. Colin, everything is magnified with that football team.
I don't
Jerry
disagree
Jones
with this.
and that the star America's team. I mean, how long did the national talking heads talk about poor Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott fumbling that game against the Packers?
The way I look at it too is the Cowboys are in a peculiar spot. So it's, even with Rodgers and not really Tua, but those are guys who have had to shift through coaching staffs a little bit, and the blame hasn't always – Prescott gets all the blame, but the blame generally always hasn't been on them specifically. Lamar has had a successful coach, an ultra-successful defense, a successful offensive line, a successful running game, and they've been successful in the regular season. The Cowboys have had problems with their offensive coordinators, their defensive coordinators. They've had problems with injuries. You could say the same with a number of other quarterbacks who have had to deal with this turnover. Lamar hasn't. The only problem, yes, Mahomes is a problem. Everybody knows this. But Lamar hasn't played well. You have to play well in the postseason. If you don't win the big one, you don't win the big one. If you play great, that's why I give Josh Allen a break. He played great. He's a great postseason quarterback. But Lamar hasn't. He hasn't played well at all.
Well, the most pressure. Like I'm thinking of, like Dak is on that 1-year deal. Rodgers has something to prove post Green Bay. There's no pressure under Lamar going into this year when you're a 2-time MVP winner and you're probably well on your way to winning another one before things are all said and done.
I disagree. I think there's a ton of pressure to win that title because what are you just going to win? You can win all the MVPs you want. But
Dan Marino made a career off it, Colin.
And Dan Marino, everybody stuns Dan Marino for not winning the big one. So there's a level of Elway versus Marino. Yeah, Marino's got the talent, but Elway's got the titles. And it's important to distinguish the fact that if you don't play well in the postseason, that's a significant, mark on that career.
So you're saying Rodgers has a championship. There's no pressure on him whatsoever.
I'm not saying there's pressure on everybody here, but continue your point.
Okay, yeah, no, I just more or less out of the three we're talking about right now, Dak, Rodgers, Lamar. Your mindset right now about Rodgers is he's already won. He's already a Hall of Fame quarterback. How much pressure is there really? And maybe there's more pressure on the Jets as an organization than Rodgers. I get that. But I think there is the reason I chose Aaron Rodgers is because you mentioned the whole Brett Favre thing, and it is a little similar to that. I think Rodgers, when he looks back, he'd rather go, God, things were successful in New York, rather than, oh, that was a disaster.
I agree. I think Rodgers is at a bit of a crossroads in whether I want to end my career like Brett Favre or I want to end my career like Tom Brady. And this is sort of, he hasn't had the career of Tom Brady, but in the sense of leaving your team, proving you could do it without the franchise behind you, and, stapling yourself in the all-time conversations, which he's already in. But the point is, he's trying to figure out how you want to finish your career. Brady ended on the highest of highs.
Okay.
Favre didn't, so I think it's a matter of that.
Continuing a little bit then. Dak. Let's go to Dak. Not so on him. He's played well. The team has failed him. Do I have that right? It's more or less Lamar.
He hasn't played great in postseason, but he has been, I would say, a little more successful. He's played better than Lamar has.
I won't argue that. I'm not going to.
He's better than Lamar has.
Give me the Lamar statistics again. Do you have those on hand?
He was 2 for 4 in the playoffs in win-loss, 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, 3 rushing touchdowns and 6 fumbles. So that's just off the turnovers.
So I understand now. Your direct correlation is performance and the need to not be a Dan Marino-esque quarterback and to get over the hump.
You need to win. You need to play well. If you could, Peyton Manning, his second Super Bowl title, thank God he had the first. There's a certain level of, it's contextual. You have to play well, but you also, team, if you have a couple bad games, big deal. Roethlisberger made a career off of this. But you need to play well in a big game, and Lamar doesn't have that. There's no staple game for Lamar. Right. I think that's a problem.
And I quickly back to my Rodgers point. We mentioned Hassan Reddick. We mentioned the GM Joe Douglas. We mentioned Robert Salah. Colin, I think that there's a good chance that this Jets team could be completely blown up after this year. I think it's trending more towards that than playoffs and success. And you mentioned it. Who says Rodgers is going to step in and play like an MVP candidate? He blew the game against Detroit. All right, not him specifically.
He didn't play well, but yes.
He didn't play well. His team blew the game at home in Lambeau to Detroit. That doesn't happen. Colin, did you hear what I just said? They blew the game in Lambeau at home against Detroit. And then
that's why I think Rodgers might be dangerous.
And then the lasting image I have of Rodgers is him being on the ground and being out for the year. So that's why I think there's pressure on Rodgers. Colin, you've been around the New York media your whole life. Those people are vultures.
Totally.
Vultures.
Totally. But it's also the Jets. The Jets don't get the flack the Giants do. But I also think Rodgers is good with the media, weirdly enough. He bad headlines, but he doesn't care. He knows how to stay in it. And I think he's very in tune with what's being said about him. Whether he likes to admit it or not, he is. And I think that's a big motivator for him. Watch Rodgers and the Jets make some noise this year.
He should have never went there. That's my whole take on it. He should have never went there.
The writing was on the wall And it worked out for both sides when Jordan Love was drafted.
And maybe they were the only team in the market.
And the writing was on the wall when Jordan Love was drafted. That's Mike Rizzo right there. Colin Russo. Russo and Rizzo live here on ESPN 106.3. Follow along on socials at ESPN West Palm on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, you name it.